Hello and welcome. I'm Peggy Mihelic, Associate Director of Member Content here at APA. Today's webinar is titled Supercharge Your Presence, Self-Publishing, How to Get Started. This presentation will cover the following topics: the benefits and the potential risks of self-publishing, how to choose between self-publishing, traditional publishing, and other routes like blogging or YouTube, how self-publishing works and how to get started. Some important points before we get going. The views expressed in this presentation are those of the presenter and may not reflect the views or policies of the American Psychological Association. Next, this program does not offer CE. However, we will email everyone watching live today a certificate of attendance. During our time together, you will be on mute. You can communicate to us using the questions box located in your webinar control panel. We have handouts for you to download. You can access them in the handouts box, also located in the webinar control panel. These can be downloaded at any time during the presentation. If you have trouble downloading them, don't worry. We'll email you the handouts along with the recording in a few weeks. Have a question for our presenter? Type them in using the questions box located in your webinar control panel. Daniel Wendler is the author of Improve Your Social Skills, Level Up Your Social Life, and Clicking with Clients. He's a doctoral student in clinical psychology at George Fox University and a doctoral intern at the University of Houston with expected doctorate completion in August of 2019. Wendler is also the founder of marketingfortherapists.org, where he uses his insights from his previous career in online marketing to help psychologists reach their goals online. Daniel is excited to share his self-publishing insights with you today. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for inviting me here. Let me turn on my webcam just briefly so you can all see my happy face that I'm excited to be a part of this. I'm not going to leave the webcam on for the whole presentation because we've heard that sometimes that can cause technical glitches, but just wanted you to know that I'm a real person and they haven't trained AI to give these presentations, at least not yet. So let me jump right in. So thank you so much for sharing that bio with everybody. I also wanted to give just a little bit of perspective on kind of my expertise and why it makes sense to listen to me specifically about self-publishing. Self-publishing is something that I've been doing for quite a long time. My first book was self-published way back in 2014, and since that time I've sold a lot of copies. This is, wait, why is the slide not advancing? Okay, there we go. This is my sales data from just the last 30 days. So as you can see, I've sold almost 500 books in the last 30 days. It's a little bit higher than average because I had a really big spike there in the middle. I still don't know what was going on. For whatever reason, everybody was buying my books that day. But like, this is a pretty, reasonable amount of book sales, and that's been pretty consistent for the past couple of years. So for me, self-publishing has been really impactful in my life. It's provided some good extra income, and I think more importantly, it's allowed me to make a really significant impact on the world. I get emails from readers all around the world who have said, "Hey, I read your book, it really impacted me. Here's how I applied the things that you wrote, and here's how it helped me." And so I'm really passionate about this, and I want other people to also put books out there in the world and help make a difference. So why? Here's kind of what we're going to talk about for today. I want us to, first start by considering why to do self-publishing versus traditional publishing, because there's a lot of different options for publishing your book. I also want to talk about, like, what if you shouldn't publish a book at all? What if there's some other way of making an impact? I want to talk about the risks and opportunities that are involved in self-publishing specifically, because you want to sort of have informed consent and be aware of what you're getting into. I want to focus on Amazon self-publishing options, because that's generally the direction that I recommend that people go in. And so I want to sort of orient you to what's going on there. And then finally, I want to give you some tools for really getting started with the process, because I think a lot of folks can come to these kind of webinars and they can be excited, but then they say, okay, well, what do I actually do to start making forward momentum? And then they don't know, and then nothing really changes. So that's kind of what I want to end us on. Because there's so much to cover on this topic, this presentation is really going to be more of a opportunity for you to reflect on what is the right path for you, more so than actually telling you, all right, here's how to do all 100 steps on that path. So we're going to get a little bit more, I mean, we'll have some how-to baked into this, but we're going to get more into the specifics of, okay, how do you set up an author page, and how do you sell your books, and how do you, write your book, and things like that in our future webinars. And also there's some information on that in the handout, but this should hopefully give you a sense of if this is a road that you want to go down or not. Why write a book in the first place? I mean, since you're tuning in, you're probably at least somewhat curious about that idea. But here's a couple of things that I think are really important to consider. The first thing is that writing a book allows you to make a really wide impact on the world. Again, I've had readers from all over the world email me and say, hey, I've read your book and it impacted me in this way. And these are readers that, I never would have had the chance to meet otherwise. And for you, you undoubtedly make a big impact in your daily life, whether that is in your clinical practice or research or teaching or whatever else that you do, but that's limited. You're only able to meet with so many people in a given day. Whereas if you write a book, it can just sit there and it can just sell copies, and then more and more people are impacted without you doing any additional work. Also, you get to refine your ideas. If you sit down and you actually figure out how to explain a particular topic well enough for it to go in a book, then the next time that you have to explain that topic to a client or to your class, or even try to apply it in your own life, you're going to understand it better. It also gives you a lot of credibility. People say, oh, you have a book. Wow, you must be an expert. And that helps you with all sorts of things. And it gives you extra income and opportunity, at least potentially. Again, it is possible to lose money on self-publishing, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's also possible to earn money on self-publishing, or to let your book be the doorway that opens the door to a speaking engagement, or sometimes even a new job opportunity. If you've showed up to our webinar on speaking, you'll notice that a lot of these topics are pretty similar. And that's because the benefits are pretty similar in both cases. And also because I think that if you are speaking, doing writing also is a good complement for that, and vice versa. It used to be that if you wanted to write a book, you had to go the traditional publisher route, which is where you find like a publisher who will handle the book for you. You find an agent who will talk to you on the behalf of the publisher, and that's what you do. Nowadays, self-publishing is a lot more viable, but traditional publishing is still the right choice for a lot of people. Self-publishing has some big drawbacks. There's less credibility. Like, anybody can self-publish, and so if somebody realizes that you've self-published, they might be like, oh, are you really an expert, or did you just put this book up there? It's also narrower distribution. Like, even if you go with Amazon, which has the widest distribution options, you're still only going to be distributed on Amazon platforms. If you want to show up in like the airport bookstore, if you want to show up in your local bookstore, if you want to be available as a textbook for professors to buy through those channels, Amazon's probably, self-publishing probably isn't going to work for that. And then also you're totally on your own. Like, Amazon has help guides. You can go, look online for advice that people have given, but for the most part, the buck stops with you. And it is possible to hire your own help, but you don't actually know, is that help going to be good? Is it not going to be helpful? I had a friend who hired somebody to help them self-publish a book, and the person took, a lot of money and really didn't deliver anything of quality. And so that's a thing that you have to navigate if you do the self-publishing route. With traditional publishing, conversely, you have, great credibility. It's like, this is about the highest credibility that you can have from a book. You also have the widest distribution possible, and you have an expert team that is going to be there to help you edit your book, help you design your cover, help you with all of the strategy that goes into the book. So for some people, traditional publishing really is the right choice. But there's a lot of benefits of self-publishing also. I think one of the big ones is that self-publishing gives you full control and ownership. And so if I decide that I want to change out a chapter in one of my books, I can just do that. Even after the book is published, if I decided I want to update something in the book, I can just go and upload a new manuscript to Amazon, and within 24 hours, it's new on the site. I don't have to ask for permission for anybody. I can just do it. And if later on I decide I want to take my books down, or I want to give them to a new publisher, or I want to do something else, I don't have any legal responsibility to not do that. Whereas if I go with a traditional publisher, they ultimately get veto power over the book, and a lot of times you have a contract with them that says that they maintain ownership of the book for as long as they want it. So even if I maybe sign a publishing deal that's not very good for me because I'm just getting started, and then later on I get really big and I want to try to renegotiate for a better deal, they'll say, no, we already we own your book, and so we're going to continue to publish it under our more restrictive rules. If you ever look at Brene Brown's books, her very first book she published with a small publishing house, and it's still just through that small publishing house because they're very happy that they can keep publishing her books probably for a lot lower rates than she could command right now. Also with self-publishing, you get higher royalty. If you self-publish, again on Amazon, if you self-publish an ebook, you get about 2/3 of the revenue. And then if you publish a paperback book, you get about 1/3 of the revenue. Whereas if you publish a traditional book, you would maybe get just maybe 10% or $1 per copy or something very low. Also, there's no barriers to entry. So if you decide, okay, I want to go and publish a book, you can do that. There's a blog post that I read where a guy decided to see just how easy it was to get on a book on Amazon, and so he made a one-page book and he published it in 10 minutes, and it was live on the site within like an hour. And so, obviously you want to put more than 10 minutes into your book, but you can just go and do it. It's very easy. Whereas with traditional publishing, you have to convince an agent to like you. The agent has to convince a publisher to like you. There's a lot more hoops to jump through. So if you do decide to go the traditional publishing route, then what I would say is you have to have a platform first. I am only self-published, but I did look into traditional publishing. And what I found when I talked to agents is that they said the main thing is really not the quality of the idea of your book or anything like that. It's really about the platform that you have, because they want a sense that you're gonna bring some readers to the book kind of built in. So if you have a big mailing list, if you've been on if you've been on Oprah, if you've had a TED Talk, if you are a professor at a prestigious university, these are all things that they feel like they can then sell you in addition to just selling the book. But if you're kind of a nobody, even if you're a nobody with a great idea, it's going to be a lot harder to convince them. You also have to find an agent. It's almost impossible to get the traditional publishing houses to pay attention to you if you don't have an agent. And so you need to find what's called a literary agent. And the main way to do that is, you can just go on Google and search for them. But what I suggest is that you find some books that you like, that you respect, that are kind of similar to what you would want to do. And then you look in the kind of like the front matter of the book or the acknowledgments. And a lot of times the agent might be mentioned on like the copyright page, or in the acknowledgments page, they'll say, and thank you to my agent so-and-so for your help in the book. And then you can know, who to search for. And finally, this is a complicated process. Agents are really picky about how they want you to query them. They're really picky about, what your idea should include. It's a long process. Finding the right agent is difficult. I ended up, even though I was not able to move forward with an agent, I put probably 10 or so hours into the process of searching, and I think that that's kind of what you would expect. So expect that that's going to take some time if you go that route. It's also worth considering that there's other ways to make an impact and build credibility and things like that without producing a book. You could start a YouTube channel, you could do blogging, you could do public speaking. All of these also have the benefits of low barriers to entry, and they might fit your style better. If you you took a video class back in your undergrad and you feel really comfortable in front of a camera, or the idea of waiting for people to read your work until you finish the whole thing is really, you don't like that, but you like the idea of being able to hit publish and then they read it right away. Blogging could be good for you. So I would say consider other options. Don't just say that, all right, if I want to make an impact, if I want to build a platform, it has to be self-publishing. But self-publishing is what this webinar is about, so that's what we're going to focus on. One more thing about kind of like the risks of self-publishing. I like this. I searched for like, photographs of ethics that I could use, and I found this one of a guy just getting hit in the face by ethics. Sometimes that's the way that it feels. You're just sort of walking along and oops, you get blindsided by an ethical issue. That's not what you want to have happen to you with self-publishing. You want to make sure that you stay above board. And so there's a couple of things to keep aware of. The first is client confidentiality. There are other books that are written by therapists where they say, okay, I talk about case examples, but I've gotten written permission from my clients, and I change personal details, and so it's okay for me to talk about my clients. They certainly do that, and they get published and they get away with it. But I think that you do want to be really careful with that, because it is possible that you might unknowingly put pressure on a client to give you that permission. Maybe a client doesn't really want their story to appear in a book, but they also don't want to disappoint you. And so then they say yes. And then maybe later on they say, oh, I really don't like how you wrote about me. They file a complaint with the board. That's just a bad thing to do. So I think that this is less of a risk with traditional publishing because you have access to their legal team and other folks to help support you. But if you're self-publishing, I would be really cautious about including client stories in your work. I would say that maybe the safest option is to do sort of compilations of clients where none of your clients could look at a particular story and recognize themselves in it, but you're still drawing from your insights. Also, similarly, you could run into problems with self-promotions if you promote your book to your clients. Like somebody comes into your therapy room, they're vulnerable, you say, hey, you know what would really help you, my book, then you're kind of pressuring them to give you some money, even if that's not maybe the way it feels to you. And that again can land you into hot water. And then finally, you want to be careful about writing within the bounds of your competence. So if you decide to say, you know what, I'm going to write a great book about nutritional supplements that help with anxiety because I found some that really helped me and blah, 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 that's really writing outside the bounds of your competence most likely because, you're trained to do mental health work. You're probably not trained to talk about nutrition and things of that nature. And so then that can get you into hot water as well. So I would say make sure that what you are writing on is something that is well within your professional wheelhouse. And if you venture a little bit outside your bounds of competency in your book, really make sure that you mention that and say like, hey, this is not based on my clinical training. This is, just my own experience, take it with a grain of salt, things of that nature. So the one last risk that you got to be aware of before you decide to dip your toe into self-publishing is the financial investment that's involved in it. There's two main investments that you have to spend, and then there's other things that you may or may not choose to spend. But your book is going to need a cover, and it's going to need a manuscript that is prepared so that it's sort of formatted correctly for whatever self-publishing system you choose, which is, again, probably going to be Amazon. A cover costs anywhere between $50 to $500, sometimes even more, depending on where you go. The $50 covers usually are pre-made covers, so somebody just made a lot of covers, and then you buy whatever one you want, they slap your title on it, and there you go. So there might be another book in the Amazon store that has the exact same cover as you. It's not really personalized to your book, so it's not very good, but you're also only paying $50. So that can maybe be a good option if you are just testing the waters, you want to minimize your investment. And then maybe later on you update it with a better cover. And then 500 is more what you would spend for like a professional cover designer that's going to kind of make it from scratch. As far as manuscript preparation, you can prepare your manuscript yourself, but you have to be willing to put in a lot of time in order to do so, because there's a lot of really finicky rules. It's just like, putting your dissertation together, but on steroids. There's a lot of really finicky rules that Amazon wants you to follow and how you format the Word document so it shows up correctly. So my first book, I made the manuscript myself. I probably put, easily 12 hours or more into it. And then every time after that, I just decided to pay a professional, $200-300 because my time was worth more than that. And I'll have some suggestions for where you can go to find these folks at the end of our talk. If you decide to hire a professional editor, that amount can really vary. You could hire somebody, you could just find some, smart English student at your local university just to do some proofreading. They're probably going to charge a very low rate. You could find somebody who's, a really expert editor and who's worked on prestigious problems, and they might be charging you $400 an hour. So that can really vary. And then your marketing budget also is going to vary. It is possible to market your books for free, but you also want to consider that it can be helpful to maybe buy some ads or do some other things to help promote your book, because it's no good to put all the work into writing your book and it just sits there and nobody finds out about it. So you want to sort of anticipate that you're going to spend something on that. And so, all right, these are the upfront costs that you're going to pay, but what are the odds that you're going to make money on this? Well, if you sell your book for about $5 as an ebook and $12 as a paperback, which is around where I sell most of my books, that seems like a pretty good sweet spot. You're going to earn about $3.50 per sale, at least again on Amazon. And this is vary. It depends on various factors, but this is a good even rule of thumb. So that means that you got to sell about 200 copies, and then you'll break even, assuming that you spent maybe $400 on your cover and $300 on your manuscript. 200 copies doesn't seem like that much, but a lot of self-published authors never even sell 10 copies. Their book just goes on the store and it's never discovered. Nobody ever finds it. So there is a risk that you will never get your money back, if you choose to invest in this. But I think if you have a reasonable strategy for how you could get just 200 sales, whether that is from speaking engagements, whether that is from some kind of online marketing, whether that's because you're going to run an advertising campaign. And again, we'll talk about these options more in our next talk. If you have a reasonable strategy and 200 copies doesn't seem too far off, then there's a decent chance that you'll at least break even. And then every copy that you sell after that is just passive income. Let's say that you do decide, all right, this sounds good, these costs feel reasonable, I can handle the ethical risks, I am going to self-publish a book. What are your options for doing so? I think that there's 3 options. You could just give your book away on your website, you could go through Amazon, or you could do other platforms. And as you can see by my little image that I found, website giveaways are sort of okay. Amazon is, I think, the best option, and other platforms I really don't recommend. And I'll explain all that in a second. So let's say you want to just give your book away on your website. You don't want to go through any third party, you just offer it totally yourself. There's 3 different ways that you can do that. First is that you just give it no strings attached. Anybody can go on your site and maybe they just click a button and they download a PDF, or maybe you just post it on your site like as a big website page. That's kind of what I do. Like if you go to marketingfortherapists.org, you can see that I have a lot of content that you just go on the site and you read it, just like any other website. Or any other web page. And this is a really great strategy for building search engine optimization, because if you give away a really good free resource and it's really easy for people to access, then the search engines like that, people are more likely to link to it. And so this is a really helpful strategy. It also allows you really to reach the most people because there's no barrier. You can also put it behind an email collection. And so you say, hey, I'll give you my free book, but you have to give me your email address first. This can be a good way to build up a mailing list if that's a part of your marketing strategy. But it does annoy some people because they don't want to give you their email address. It's also possible to sell your book directly on your website. There's software that you can plug into your website that will allow you to do that. I really don't recommend this option because most people, if they're going to buy a book, they're going to want to buy it through Amazon or reputable site that they've heard of. But the benefit of doing this is that you keep almost all of the money. Like usually your payment processing is maybe like 3%, and then after that you keep everything rather than keeping, say, 2/3, which you would through Amazon. You also have a little bit more flexibility because Amazon limits the prices that you can charge for your books. But if you say, you know what, my book is so amazing, I want to charge $50, you can do that through your own website. Again, I don't really recommend it. I don't think that most people are going to spend that money, but it is an option. I want you to know about it. I think that there are a couple of different players that you can use to self-publish your own book, but I really do recommend that Amazon is the right choice for almost everybody. And the reason for that is because Amazon has really wide distribution built in. When you self-publish on Amazon, you are immediately available in every Amazon store worldwide. So again, I have people from India, I have people from Britain that are buying my books, and I didn't have to do any additional work to reach those people than I did to reach people here in the States. You also get a higher royalty rate. Amazon has the flexibility to not make all that much money off of any individual thing because they've got so many stuff, so many different businesses. And so they're going to give you a higher royalty rate than many of the other platforms. It also feels a little bit more legitimate. People are comfortable buying through Amazon, whereas if you're only available on some website they haven't heard of, they might be like, do I really want to put my credit card information? And then Amazon also has the benefit that you can order cheap copies of your books and have them shipped to you. So if you want to sell the books yourself at a speaking engagement, if you want to just give them out to your clients, you can do that for a very low cost. Usually the cost is with shipping, tax, everything included, it costs about $4 to $5 per copy to have a copy of your book shipped to you from Amazon, which is very affordable. And then if you do go on Amazon, the way that you do that is through their program called Kindle Direct Publishing. They used to have a separate program for Kindle and then a separate program for paperback books, and then they just lumped everything under Kindle Direct Publishing. And again, this gives you worldwide distribution with one click, and there's no upfront cost. So it doesn't cost anything to enroll. You don't have to order a certain number of books ahead of time because they only do ebooks and print on demand. So if nobody buys your book, then they don't print anything. It doesn't cost them anything, so it doesn't cost you anything either. The way that you get started with Kindle is pretty simple. You go to kdp.amazon.com. You can log in with your existing Amazon account, or if you wanted to, you could create a new one just for this. I don't really think that there's a big benefit of keeping it separate unless other people also use your Amazon account. Like if your kid gets on your Amazon account and you don't want them to maybe log in and mess up your book settings or something, then maybe you would make a separate Amazon account just for this. You give them a manuscript and a cover that's fit to their specifications. You fill out some information on like how do I want, what I want to charge for the book, where do I want the book to be distributed, and then you fill out the book information, and you sort of fill out the description, the title, all of that, and then you're done. It's really, again, if you don't care about the actually writing the book, actually get or rather once the book is written, getting it into Amazon can be just a 10-minute process, and so it's very, very straightforward. And again, there's no cost involved in that. Also, Amazon owns ACX.com, which I think stands for the Audiobook Creation Exchange, something of that nature. And this allows you to get your books, your audiobooks on Audible and the iTunes store and places like that. And this is a really slick process because it has a built-in way for you to recruit audiobook narrators. You just post a little snippet from your book, and then you say, hey, people, please audition for this. And then people who are audiobook narrators will audition. You can choose the best one. And then you can either choose a royalty split option where you say, you know what, whatever we earn on this book, we split it 50-50, and then that's a permanent agreement. You can't change that. Or you just pay them outright, and usually you pay them per completed hour. So if the audiobook is like 2 hours long, you would pay them a certain amount, per hour for those 2 hours. Typically speaking, if you are, the more that you pay, the more likely you are to get a good narrator, and then the more credible you are, like the more that you've had other books that have sold that have done well, the more that a narrator is going to be willing to do a royalty split with you, at least a good narrator. So usually what I suggest is to get your book on the Kindle store first, get a little bit of traction there, and then if it seems like there's some legs behind your book, then go and get your audiobook, because then it'll either make sense to say, all right, I am going to commit to just paying a narrator outright, or my book has enough credibility that a narrator is going to be willing to do a 50-50 split with me. Because if they record your book and it doesn't sell anything, then the 50-50 split is just wasted time for them. So those are some of the different options for kind of getting your book out there. And again, there are other possibilities, and I think it is worth potentially looking into them. I would say some other self-publishing places have some features that Amazon may not, or you might just kind of ethically feel like you would rather support like a small business rather than the big Amazon conglomerate. But honestly, I think if you want to reach the most people, if you want kind of like the best game in town, Amazon is the place to go. So that's sort of how to get started there. But then let's say you decided, all right, so I do think that I want to get started on Kindle, but how do I actually start making some steps towards that? So again, Kyler's going to talk a little bit more about like, choosing a topic for your book and like, staying motivated with the writing process. But I wanted to make sure that today I give you some opportunity to make some headway even today if you wanted to. So I think that there's 3 things that are small goals that are really good ways of like testing the waters and seeing if this is something that you would want to do. So the first one is very simple. It's just to read related books. And what that means is that you go and you find other books that are on the topic that you might conceivably want to write about. And what I would say is get a collection, like read some books that like look pretty good, that you think like, man, this is going to be a great book. And then also read some books that are not that good, that are just kind of like the competition, but you're like, oh, this looks kind of sketchy. And the reason for that is because that's going to give you a really good sense of what people are doing well and what people are doing not so well. And it's going to let you know, what to do and to avoid in your own book. And it's also going to give you a sense of if I have something unique that I can contribute here. Like way back in 2014, the first book that I wrote was about social skills. And so I went on the Amazon store and I started searching for like social skills, friendship, conversation, things of that nature. And I looked at what was coming up, and there was a couple of good books here and there, but most of it was like really, really bad advice from like pickup artists, skeezy guys, or just like, somebody who was had clearly just slapped together a book to make $1, and none of it was really very good. And so I decided, you know what, I have something here where I'd be able to offer something really valuable. Whereas if I had gone and I had looked and there was, you know, a dozen really, really excellent high quality books all on that topic, then I might have said, all right, you know, either I need to learn from these books and I need to figure out how to do something that's just as good as them, or maybe I'm going to try to find a different topic that'll be kind of unique. But if you start by reading some related books, that's going to help lay the groundwork for your own writing. Also, the other two things, I have slides for them. So the second thing, pardon me, is the Seth Godin Writing Challenge. And Seth Godin is like a marketing guru and really a writing expert. He has one of the most popular blogs in the world, and that's because he writes a blog post every single day and has been doing that for like the past 10 years. He's so prolific that if you just search for the word Seth in Google, I think that his blog is like the first thing that comes up. So the guy knows about writing, and he has a suggestion for how to get started with writing and kind of get past some of the resistance and the hesitation that you might have about writing. It's pretty straightforward. The first thing is that you make a free anonymous blog, and you really don't want to put a lot of effort into this. I just get something free on Blogger or WordPress or whatever. You know, you don't have to build your own website. It's all about low barriers to entry. And then commit to writing 10 500 or more word posts in 30 days. And so that averages to about, you know, 1 every 3 days, or, you know, 2, maybe 3 a week. And that's a pretty rapid pace, but it's a way of testing yourself to see, can I keep up this pace? And what is this kind of pace like for me? Because if you can stay diligent with this, then probably you're going to be able to stay diligent in writing an actual book. But if you try to keep up this pace and it just isn't viable, like you write 2 posts and then you leave it alone for a month, that's a pretty good sign to you that you're probably not ready for this, or that it's just not a high priority for you compared to the other things in your life. And that's okay. Like, you've got a lot of other good things in your life. This one doesn't have to be at the top of the list. But let's say you do write these 10 posts, and I should clarify that these posts could be about anything. Like, you could just use it as an excuse to just write, or you could try to write 10 posts all on a similar topic if you really do have a solid book idea in mind and you want to start to make some headway on that. But whatever you do, if you can make the 10 posts in the 30 days, then once you've gotten the 10 posts, then get some feedback on your blog. Just find some trusted friends, trusted colleagues, people like that you respect, and just sort of ask them to read it and be like, hey, what do you think of this? And, you know, because it's anonymous, if you really wanted to, you could say like, hey, I just stumbled across this blog post. What do you think of it? Or, hey, my friend wrote this. You know, I'd tell them the truth afterwards, but if you wanted really unbiased feedback, you could do that. Or you could just sort of say, hey, I did this writing challenge and I want to see, do I have something valuable here? And then try to get the best feedback that you can about if you've got, you know, the seed of something that might grow into something good. And I should give you the expectation that when you first start out, your writing is probably not going to be that great, because it takes practice and it takes editing. And so you're not looking for somebody to look at your blog and to say, oh, wow, this has changed my life. This is, you know, you are the new Shakespeare, hooray. You're just looking for somebody to say like, yeah, like this is rough, but it's got potential. And then you also, you know, want to make that determination for yourself. You know, think about what the experience was like for you. Did it feel like pulling teeth every day that you sat down to write your book, or you know, every day that you sat down to write your blog, or was it enjoyable? Did you find that you were looking forward to the next time that you sat down to write, or did you even, you know, write a little bit more than you had to every day? Because what you're trying to do in this is to really just learn more about yourself. Am I the sort of person that really wants to sit down and write, or is it a nice idea, but it's not actually congruent with me? So then once you've completed this, then you can make a decision. You can decide that this was a good experiment, but I'm just going to leave it alone. And then you go back to your life and you just kind of, you know, put the book idea on the back burner. Or you could decide, I'm going to take these posts and I'm going to use them as the beginning part of a book. Or you could decide, I'm going to make my blog public and I'm actually going to start to continue to build on this. Or you might decide, you know what, the actual writing that I did, I'm just going to delete the blog. The blog posts that I made were not very good, but I'm going to continue to write because I'm finding that the process of writing is good for me, even if my first attempts weren't that good. So you can respond to this in a lot of different ways. You have total freedom. But the important thing is that this lets you gather information about what's right for you, and then you make a decision about where to go from there. So that's the writing challenge. And then kind of the next step of that is to write a tiny book. And this picture over here, this is actually the first book that I put on Amazon. It's still on there, and people still occasionally buy it, but it's not that great. And like the cover, I just like gave a friend like $20 to slap together a cover in Photoshop. You know, but what this book did for me is that this was sort of like the proof of concept, because I was like, man, would anybody read a book if I happened to put it on Amazon? Is it worth putting in the time and the effort? Is it worth paying a professional cover designer? Can I even figure out how to manage the Amazon system? I had a lot of anxiety, and so I really wasn't confident to just completely go gung-ho. And so what I did first is I wrote this little tiny book on how to make conversation, and it's just like 20 some pages long. And I'm selling it for 99 cents. And so I'm making very little money off of each copy, but there are also, you know, very low barriers to people reading it. And so what I suggest, if you want to dip your toes in the self-publishing world, is to do the exact same thing. Write a little tiny book. Just aim to have it be like 20 to 30 pages long. It's not very long at all. And then, you know, sell it for 99 cents or as low as you can go. Just so that as many people as possible choose to buy it. It's not really designed to be a moneymaker, but then you also want to put as little money as possible into it yourself. So get a really cheap cover, maybe even try to put the manuscript together yourself, just as a way to test the waters. And then I would suggest focusing on a single helpful topic, because that's going to make it the most likely that people will pick up on it. Like if your little small book has a really clear value proposition, somebody looks at it and they're like, oh, if I spend 99 cents and I read this for 20 minutes, I'll get a little bit better at making conversation. Okay. Or if you're like, oh, I have 20 tips for managing your anxiety. Okay. 30 things you can do to improve your relationship with your teenager. Okay. Like that's a very easy way for people to start to buy the book. And then by really creating these low barriers to entry, you can kind of see if people, even with those low barriers to entry, are purchasing your book, because maybe you put it out there and nobody buys it at all. That's a pretty good sign that you're going to have to revamp your marketing strategy if you want somebody to buy your full price book that's maybe a little bit less focused or whatever. So this is, again, a really excellent way of doing some experimentation and getting used to the Kindle process and gathering information that will let you know if this is something that you really want to invest in. And if you're anything like me, it's also a great way of reducing your anxiety. And if the whole thing feels overwhelming, this feels like a pretty good place to start. So if you decide, all right, I'm going to start down this road, but I really need some help, where do I go to try to find some resources? There's 3 folks that I've worked with that I suggest you start with. I'm not going to make like a full endorsement of them, because I really believe in you doing your own due diligence. And so, like take these as just a starting place for your research. But these are all credible people that you could, at least, if you find somebody else, you can use this as a comparison point. So if you decide that you want to hire an editor or a writing coach, my colleague and friend Kyler Shumway, who will be presenting later in the week, he does a lot of that. He specializes specifically in helping therapists, so he's a really great choice for that. If you want a manuscript formatter, I've used Philip Gessert at Gessert Books for a couple of my different books, and he does a really, really excellent job. And so that's a possible option. And then for my Improve Your Social Skills book, I hired Demonza to create the cover. They also do manuscript formatting, but I never hired them for that, so I can't speak to that. But I think that they you can look at the cover yourself, but I think that they did a pretty good job of designing that cover. Certainly it's gotten some sales. And so I think that they're on the more expensive end as far as cover designers. They're like $600 to make a cover for your book. But that's, again, at least a place to start to see a credible source of cover design. And then if you're like, okay, well, I'm a reader and I would really like some additional guidance, there's 3 books that I think are really helpful. There's The War of Art by Steven Pressfield, which is really about overcoming your resistance to sitting down and writing and getting you like in that seat, open up the Word document, actually making some progress. Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott really sort of talks about the philosophy of writing and just has a lot of really good, wise, and inspirational nuggets. And then On Writing Well by William Zinsser. I probably should have practiced pronouncing that name. Anyway, on Writing Well is just a really solid book of practical tips on like how do you actually make your writing flow and sound really good? I think that one of the, I read that book as I was putting together my first book, and it really helped me in some specific ways. I think the biggest one was kind of on the focus on like, brevity and not saying something, 3 times if you can say it just once, things of that nature. So these are some places to start. And again, you can find all these on Amazon. I know that we've got a lot of questions that have come in already, and then there's been some more that have come in during the presentation. So whatever questions we have, let's jump into them.
Thank you for that great presentation. Very helpful for those interested in getting started in the self-publishing world, who are very unfamiliar with it. We have a lot of questions coming in. A lot of them are about picking a topic, how to pick a topic. How do I know that that what I have to say is important and worth self-publishing?
Yeah. So I guess I can speak to that. I think that I will say that if you tune into Kyler's webinar later in the week, he's going to speak a little bit more specifically on the idea of finding a topic. And then also the handout has a little bit of information on that as well. But I'll take a crack at it, and I'll try to offer some insights that are not going to be covered in those 2 things. I think the biggest thing that I would say is that I think that from your daily life, you should hopefully have some insight into the sort of things that you have to offer and the sort of things that resonate with folks. So I think that if there is something that is perfect, like personally really impactful for you, like if you went through an experience that was really challenging or really meaningful, chances are what you've learned from that is going to be meaningful for other people as well. Or if you've gained really deep expertise in something, chances are that it's okay to trust that expertise and to believe that even though the things that you learned might seem like second nature to you, that other people really do want to hear that. So I would start by asking yourself, what are things that are really meaningful for me? What are things that I'm really good at? And look for the intersection of those things. I think that I would also suggest doing a lot of like trials and experiments. And so, it's probably not a good idea to sit down and write a 500-page book before you know if it's going to be effective or not. But that's why you can do this tiny blog thing, and or the tiny book. Like, write a couple of blog posts and share it on your Facebook page. Maybe even ask a couple of your friends to share it so that you can get some feedback from people that you don't know personally. Make your tiny book, and then just print out 20 copies and give it away to people. Just ask them for some feedback. I think that those are ways to sort of let you know if there's some momentum behind what you're doing, or if it really kind of feels like it's a vanity project for you. And again, I would also suggest doing your own research to see what else is out there. Like, is the need being met by the resources that already exist? Or if you search for your topic, does it feel like there's really nobody speaking to the specific things that you would want to offer? I think that that's what I would say. I think that I would also say that sometimes people let the topic be a barrier to them getting started. Like, they say, all right, I really need to know the perfect topic before I can sit down and I can start to write. And what I suggest is the writing habit sometimes needs to come first, because sometimes that need to find a perfect topic, that will come out as you are writing. Like, as you just sort of sit down and you put your words on the page every day, eventually they start to coalesce around a particular area. But if you never sit down and do the writing, then that's not going to happen. So I'd say if you really don't know what topic, and none of the other things are really working for helping you determine that, just give yourself the 30-day 10-post writing challenge, and just see what sort of things you end up writing about when you can write about anything.
Okay. I think this is something that a lot of us struggle with when it comes to writing. And I think you touched upon this a little bit with Seth. Any helpful tips for those of us with procrastination or distractibility tendencies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that there's, I think that I could give kind of like the generic, things that I think that we would give any client with ADHD. And so that might be the place to start, to sort of say, all right, well, if I was going to give advice to a client, what would I say? And then I'll actually do that, because sometimes it can be hard to take our own advice. But I think that there's 2 things that have sort of been specifically helpful for me. I think one thing is to kind of determine what is your ideal way of working. because for me, what I've actually found, even though I suggest like the 10, the 10 post, 30-day, do 3 posts, 1 post every 3 days. What I find is that I work the most effectively when I write in like big chunks of like multiple hours at a time. So if I was going to do the 30-day challenge, I would probably say, you know what, I'm going to write 3 posts a week, but I'm going to do them all on the same, I'm going to write 3 posts every Saturday. And I'm going to just sit down and do that. And then that for me tends to work a lot better because I usually need, a little bit of time to work through my procrastination. But once I've started, then I'm really going. And so it may be that the reason why you struggle with distractibility is because you're trying to write in a way that works for other people but doesn't work for you. So I would suggest do some experiments. See if you work better with short bursts or with long bursts. See if you work better in the morning or the evening. See if you work better if you have a dedicated space for writing or if you're, among other people. I think that is going to help quite a bit. I think that I would also say that I've found that there are some signals that I give myself that sort of say this is now time to write, and that can really help. And other authors have done that as well. So there's a website called focusatwill.com that says that they have music that like helps you focus. I don't know if the science behind it is any good, but like as a placebo, it works for me. And so what I do if it's time for me to write is I put on Focus at Will, I pour myself a drink, and I say I can't start drinking this until I start writing. And the combination of like the music and the beverage, for me, that's sort of what I need to like get into my flow. And so I would say, again, experiment with things like that for you. Like, are there certain signals or triggers? Like, is there a food? Is there a beverage? Is there a music that you could kind of reserve specifically for when you're writing that can help kind of put you in that state?
That's really a really interesting approach. I like that. Someone asked, if you're not proficient at writing, but you want to be published, self-published, would you suggest working with a professional writer? Or I think I've heard the term ghostwriter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what I would say is, kind of going back to my ethical thing of talking about the boundaries of competence, this is something that I suggest you take my thoughts on this with a grain of salt because I've never worked with a ghostwriter, and so I can't speak to that for certain. But I would be hesitant about that idea. And I think the reason for that is because a good ghostwriter is going to be pretty darn expensive, and a bad ghostwriter it's not going to be very good. And so I think that, if your goal is you don't really care about the money, you just want to get your ideas on paper so that people can benefit from them or whatever else, then maybe it would make sense. But I would imagine that if you are paying for a ghostwriter to write the book for you and you want to pay for somebody who's going to do a good job, it's going to be very likely that it's going to be very hard for you to ever earn your money back from that. What I would suggest instead, if you're not a really good writer, but you really do want to share your ideas with the world, is to look into some of those other options that I talked about earlier on. Like think about, could I make YouTube videos? Would that be a really good way of sharing my ideas? Could I put together like an infographic and share it on social media where I share some cool concept and I put it together in visual form? Could I get on a podcast or do some public speaking? Are those things that really fit my strengths much better? Because I think that if you're just not a great writer or it's just not a thing that really appeals to you, then rather than trying to, maybe it still would be worth trying it. Like I'd say, do the 30-day challenge, see how that goes, etc. But before you invest thousands of dollars into a ghostwriter, I would strongly consider trying some other approach instead.
Okay. One person asked, could I use a pseudonym to publish?
Yes. When you go on Amazon and you self-publish your book, you can just write, whatever you want in the author box. Like, I'm sure that if you put like Sigmund Freud or, you said that you were Oprah or something like that, then there might be problems. But if you choose to write under a pseudonym, then you certainly can do that. I think, there's downsides to writing under a pseudonym, which is that it's if you want to, later on, like write under your real name, then that can get complicated because a lot of times people like to, if they find your most recent book, then they're going to want to go back and also read your previous book and so on and so forth. But if, let's say, maybe you wanted to write on a sensitive topic or, you just wanted to write a book of short stories, but you didn't want to connect it to your professional identity or anything of that nature, then you could write it under a pseudonym, no problem.
Okay, well, we have a couple questions about illustrations and photographs, pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice on publishing books that have pictures? And if you use an illustrator through Amazon, does Amazon have illustrators, not just for the cover art, but pictures and I think illustrations within the book?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. So Amazon does not provide you with illustrators, but they have the tools for you to upload books that have illustrations and things like that. Like I think that they even have the ability to self-publish like cookbooks and comic books and things of that nature that are very, very visual. So the tools are there. But if you are going to publish a book that is image heavy, then that makes the manuscript a lot more difficult and complex to put together so it renders well, because you don't because it needs to be set up in such a way where if somebody's reading it on their phone or they're reading it on their Kindle or they're reading it on their computer, no matter what, it all shows up okay. And so I think that you would want to hire, if you did decide to go the illustrator route, or you wanted to include photographs, expect to pay your manuscript designer a lot more, because they're going to have to work harder to put that all together, and then make sure that you're hiring a really good manuscript designer who has done work before with books that have illustrations and editors and things like, or illustrations and photographs, things like that. Beyond that, I would just say that it's just like getting illustrations for anything else. You just find somebody who can produce them for you, or you license them from somewhere. Absolutely, you want to make sure that you have the rights to any illustration or any photograph that you're putting in your book. But assuming that you are able to acquire those, then the only complex thing about putting it on Amazon is making sure that it's formatted correctly in your manuscript.
Okay, speaking of Amazon, one person asked, if you work with Amazon Publishing, can you still give away free ebooks on your website?
That's a great question. So the answer is mostly. And so Amazon has a program that you can enroll in, which I'll talk about a little bit more in my webinar on marketing, but they have a program that you can enroll in called, I think it's like Kindle Select. They change the name around sometimes, but I think it's Kindle Select. And basically what it means is that your book gets a couple of like marketing benefits. And people who have signed up for like Kindle Unlimited or things like that can download your book for free. And so it helps you market your book, but there's some trade-offs. Again, I'll talk about the pros and cons, but it does come with restrictions. If you have your book available in the Kindle Select program, then you are not allowed to have your book available for free anywhere else on the web. I think actually you're technically not even allowed to sell it anywhere else on the web, although I at least in ebook format, although I could, again, they've changed around some since I've enrolled. So if you are enrolled in that program, then there would be restrictions on you giving it away for free. However, if you're not enrolled in that program, then Amazon doesn't care. You could give it you could even like sell it on Amazon and give it away for free on your website. What I would suggest, just so that your readers don't feel cheated, is that if you do give it away for free on your website and you sell it on Amazon, make sure that the Amazon version has something that the free version doesn't, like put in an extra chapter or two, or an appendix that has some extra resources, something like that, so that they don't feel cheated.
Okay. We had this one person ask, and it's probably maybe a little specific to them, but it could be of interest to others. If, for example, you're interested in publishing a book on a study, and you've had your participants in that study signed a release form, do you need to go back and get a release form for having them be in the published book?
Mm-hmm. So I would, since I'm not a lawyer, I don't think that I can speak, super well to that. What I would say is that you would want to look at the specific release form that you have and see what kind of, rights that they signed away. I think you'd also want to, consult with, like if you're working at a university, the easy option is to like talk to your university counsel, something like that. But I would be really careful about that, because I think even if the participants did like agree to consent to the study, and there was something in the form where it said also they gave away the rights to this being included in the book. If, you know, informed consent is important, right? And so if they didn't really understand that they were agreeing to show up in your book, and then suddenly, you know, they appear and then they find the book on the shelf and they're like, what? It's talking about the study that I was in. Then that might then, you know, again, even if legally you're protected, ethically you might have crossed a line there. So you know, I would consult and get advice on your specific case, but those are some of the things that I would want to be aware of. And you know, I think you always want to err on the side of you know, protecting other individuals and you know, staying in the ethical zone.
Yes. And then our next question here is about self-publishing. Is it going to hinder you if you self-publish, hinder you from getting picked up by a literary agent if you end up going the traditional, or if you want to pursue a traditional publishing route? Is, you know, is self-publishing gonna, are they gonna ding you for that?
Yeah, so what I would say is if you are going to traditionally publish a new book that's like not the book that you've self-published, then I don't think that it's has any kind of, you know, negative possible effect. If anything, I think the fact that you have self-published the book and you've sort of shown that there's an audience for your book and things like that, I think that's going to help you. I think that if you self-publish a book and maybe you sell it for a year and then your sales just sort of really drop off throughout that year, and then you decide to turn around and try to give that same book to a traditional publishing house, I think that they might, you know, turn up their eyebrows at that. But I think that if your book is, you know, I think if your book is consistently selling well, then that would actually make them more likely to want to take you on. Like if you've been successful in self-publishing, again, there's this idea of proving your platform. So if you can say like, hey, I've self-published this book this year and I sold this many copies, and then now I want to take it to the next level, they might then look at that and say, okay, like you've been successful on your own, that gives us evidence that we can take it further. But again, the nice thing about self-publishing through Amazon is that you can take things down, you know, with a click of a button. And so if for whatever reason you did talk to a publishing house and they said, okay, we'll take you on, but we really don't want your self-published works floating around out there, then, I mean, you can make the decision if that's worth it to you or not, but you always have total flexibility to turn that off.
Okay. Well, those were some really great questions, and there was a bunch that we couldn't get to, but unfortunately, our time is running out here. Thank you so much for joining us, Daniel, and thank you to all our listeners out there for your participation today. APA has partnered with LegalZoom to offer affordable legal products and services with special discount for members. LegalZoom has helped over 4 million people with their personal and business legal needs. Their products include business formations to start and protect your practice, as well as copyrights to protect your published works. You can visit apa.legalzoom.com to learn more, and we've included a special promotional offer in the handouts box of the webinar control panel with information about registering copyrights. A recording of this presentation will be emailed to everyone in 3 weeks. The recording will include links to the handouts in case you've had trouble downloading them today. As soon as the webinar has ended, a short survey will appear on your screen. We hope you'll take just a few minutes to complete the survey and give us feedback on how we did and how we can improve. Our next self-publishing webinar will take place this Thursday, May 16th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. This beginner-level webinar is designed to help first-time authors get through the nitty-gritty of writing their first book. And on Friday, May 17th at 2 p.m. Eastern, we'll be wrapping up this series on self-publishing with a discussion on how to market your book. We are sending you the registration links via chat right now. We thank you for your attention today, and we hope you have a great day.